Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, and this is the Eve Universe show's continued coverage of the CSM 17 elections with Baldin Tarmain. How's it going, Baldin?
Chugging right along, singing a song.
Excellent. All right. Well, obviously, I'm doing a lot of interviews this year, but you're one of the ones that I don't think I was too familiar with beforehand. So I guess we will just begin at the beginning. Who is Baldin Tarmain?
Baldwin came into being in June of 2012 and started off doing a little bit of mining, uh, a little bit of industry, got blown up a few times, actually got taken under the wing of an excellent pirate who used to solo battleships in stealth bombers. So he taught me how to survive in low sec, at least part of the time, and moved forward from there. I started the corp shortly thereafter, and I started building work stabs. I would mine and then build and sell. I sold
Clearly, the
thousands.
pirate you weren't working for was Rix.
No, no. It was actually Kane the Black, but
Okay.
who is lie left the game, got married, came back for a few months, and I think he has been gone again for several years. But no, I sold thousands upon thousands of work stabs, and uh, it built up enough capital for me that I ended up eventually with 12 pause stations running dual reactions, and so I was making quite a bit of ISK, and I did that for 5 years as a one man with one uh, extra tune. Um, then came along Athenors, and with the promise of you're going to have to mine them as regular ore belts, I decided it was time to start recruiting. And I brought in a core of people. We did pretty well. Um, and of course, eventually somebody just decides that they want to shoot you, even if they don't want what you have. And that happened to us. Uh,
I,
we joined a local alliance. It was Ebola who shot us, by the
but
way, so everyone's familiar with that.
before you get too much
Yeah,
further with the story, I've got actually a question for you. So
sure.
you were doing this all by yourself, and then they introduced the Athenor. So you were one of those people that really, really, really had your gameplay disturbed by those changes. How did you feel about those changes at the time?
I actually, the changes didn't bother me at the time because it was really substituting one type of gameplay for another.
Right.
And as
So you
I
just
started
adapted.
become right, and as I became more of the community, it became more important to be out with the guys mining than it was about just being on my own.
Right. So that was actually kind of the point that I was going to. Like now that after the fact, are you thankful for the changes and the fact that it pushed you towards making a group?
Certainly because it pushed me towards making a group.
All right.
I've had some really solid friends, and I've through as most everyone who's been in the game for a while does through Eve. Um, some I've met in real life, some I may never meet in real life, but we use mining as our Zen time right now.
Sure.
We
A lot of people
just
do.
chill out, we BS, we tell stories. I never ending talk, and we collect some more. And
I
it
like
was, oh, go ahead.
I like to say that mining is the fishing of Eve. It's great if you're doing it on the weekend with a beer and your buddies. Not so great if you're doing it for a living or by yourself.
Well, certainly the by yourself part. The We did it for a living, but when the Athenors came out, I mean, we had 8 spod moons, so life was good. I mean, we were building. We're like 5 of us building a cap a week, um, and that, of course, went away eventually. And that was well, we joined an alliance because we were being pushed, um, and we pushed back. We survived, uh, and things went on. We moved into Great Wildlands a little bit and got pushed there when Pravi broke up. We had some of those groups come in and help our enemies. So it was a little bit too much to take. And that old alliance was almost underdogs, and that closed. Um, and then I started getting pummeled in low sec, and we were down to 2 people. The alliance closed. Our corp was down to 2 people active, and we held out in high sec and eventually came back, and built up at least twice the size of what we were before. And one point we were running 28 moons. So we had a moon a day for 4 weeks.
Oof.
Uh, well,
That's a lot of work.
when you're, it's, I found, and I've had people ask me and I managed them all. I fed them all. Um, they say, how do you do it? And I said, it's really about a pattern. Once you get into a pattern, it is not as difficult as you might think. If you look at it just from the outside of 28, the number's overwhelming.
Right.
If you're just, but it's driving patterns is a part of what I do for real. So, and pattern recognition. So that helps me a lot. But, when things get a little crazy and hairy, it does get a little more difficult.
Okay, but I would say that so far your story is like the poster child for EVE Online, or at least like CCP's theories about EVE Online, right? Like every move that, even no matter how much the player base liked it or not liked it, sounds like it like pushed you in the right direction, right? Towards people, building alliances, building, like every step of the way. So it sounds like you should be having a pretty decent time and having a good story. Why are you running for the CSM now?
Well, and the first scarcity level, um, I understood the reasoning for, oh, there are too many supers. There's too much going in to null. The SOV coalitions are running everything. The problem that I thought is you're never going to wipe out economies of scale. And that's what those coalitions have. They have economies of scale. Anything you do to cut them back is going to slaughter the really little guys.
Right.
And it's going to push hard on the intermediate people. I'm not really to an intermediate level in our alliance. We're still a small alliance, and we may stay that way forever. I've never had any desire to go to SOV space. NPC null was fine. It was near the home system. I've been in that same system for the entire 10 years that
Are
I've
you in Great Wildlands now?
we were until
Oh,
we had someone decided they wanted our space and they called P-Horde to help them.
fair enough. I was going to say, if you
So
see Leopold, let me know.
now we were in the extreme western edge of
Fair enough.
GW. But so, I saw, the promises of, well, we're going to restrict this. And so obviously it's going to be a whole lot more value in the smaller quantities that you mine, which I was skeptical. And I tend to look for cracks in what's going forward because I deal with scientific equipment and scientific methods. So trying to determine in advance what's going to go south is extremely helpful.
Sure.
And I looked at it and I said, I don't quite know if that's going to fly, but okay, they have a plan. They're telling us they have a plan. I know it's CCP, but I'm willing to give them the time.
I love it. I know it's CCP, but maybe we should, be okay with it anyways. No.
Hey, even a blind pig finds an acorn once in a while.
Sure.
Um, but I had, when the initial scarcity hit, I had some of my veteran miners say, I'm just not, I'm not down with this. And they kind of hung on for a while, and then they didn't. And then they would come back just on rare occasions. If we had some battles, they would log in. But then we got to the next stage where all of the standard ores
Oh,
in
they took out the
regular
belt. Yeah.
belts went essentially poof.
Right.
And that was another straw. So I lost some more of my veterans. Some left the game completely. A couple went to SOB for a while, decided and rented, and things didn't work out. So one or two came back, but really it decimated our ability to, among everything else, defend ourselves. And so I started to get pretty antsy with that aspect. And I'll be honest, going all the way back to when the first NPC miners came in, I had, this is probably why I had an inkling it wasn't going to go the way CCP claimed it would. In
Right.
our home system, in LoSec, from the day they started using NPC miners, all 5 of the belts in that system disappeared every day within 2 hours of downtime.
It's pretty bad. I will vouch for that one. It's funny because like, so
And
as a faction warfare corporation, every once in a while, you know, I'm always like, how do we better exploit the places that we do? And so like, I was like, oh, well, this is a system that's kind of a dead end and like we could still have it there and we can like bring the stuff in. I brought in all this equipment, you know, had some assigned somebody to it. He watched it for 5 days and was like, there's nothing there, man. It doesn't spawn. I'm like, God damn it. And we, so yeah, it's a real big problem.
It's going to be random spawning. And so I put in a bug report. I said, hey, you know, it's not random when it's every day for 3 months. And I got nothing back. I mean, no response. I put it on the 3rd bug report. I got the AI is operating the way that we expect. So if you don't want them in your system, we'll have to destroy them. Which was not the answer I was looking for, but it was kind of the answer I expected. And
It would be a good answer if destroying them solved the problem for any length of time, right? Like if I destroyed them today and then they didn't show up tomorrow morning, but the problem is that they get in there like before you even wake up in the morning.
or if you're going to work, I mean, you know, downtime is 7 a.m. right now for me. So
Right.
if I'm heading out the door, you know, it's all gone before I get back. And so I had, that gave me the, you know, the true, or I say, perspective to expect what was coming down the pike. And recently, with, you know, miners have gotten no love for a long time. And when they restricted ores out of certain region, whether it was out of high sec or out of low sec, what they really hurt, they didn't hurt the solve coalitions because they have economies of scale. They'll put people wherever they need
They
to get
annoyed
what.
them.
Well, yeah, they annoyed them. Ooh.
Yeah, they hurt other groups. They annoyed the no blocks. It's true.
Well, when you try to twist the arm of the null blocks, you twist the heads off the little and the medium guys.
Can very well be true.
And and the more I thought about it, you know, the more frustrated I became. Not so much for me. I'm one of those people, and it's the same with my employees, because I've had my own company for 40 years. You can abuse me all you want, and I'll be like, yeah, okay. You start abusing my people, and I get really testy really fast. And, you know, it's, my people are suffering. And they're not even, you know, some of them are low end because we bring in new, you know, noobs and help them to go through and learn mining, how to stay alive, and how not to die. Because if you don't tether up, where's your efficiency if you lose a ship every 4 or 5 days? You lose your efficiency, so it becomes not worthwhile to mine. And then, you know, you either quit the game or you go do something else, even if you wanted to do indie originally.
Right.
So I started to see that, and I remembered back to when I was building all those warp stabs. If I had not built those warp stabilizers and sold them, and I learned the market because I learned to look at the market and look for prices, where to sell them, where was the high price, where was the low price. I learned that kind of through need and osmosis. And I liken it to if someone goes to your computer and clicks here, clicks there, say, see, you go here, 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 and there. It's somewhat helpful, but you're never going to know it the way is if you found your own way through those menus.
Right. You're teaching a an algorithm as opposed to how to actually do it.
Right. And if you're willing to apply that, you know, algorithm, because it becomes ingrained in your own person because you've done it yourself from scratch, you become, you know, efficient is the big word for indie, but you become, you know, happier because you figured it out.
Right.
You become more profitable because you figured out how the markets work, at least enough to buy and sell. You know, if you want to play markets, I have a couple of those guys. I give them, you know, kudos, but not me.
it reminds me a lot of software development, right? Like when you first start learning how to write code, it's like, here is the line of text, type that in. And you're not 100% sure why it all works. Like to take the block of code and it does this thing. But over time, you start to understand what each of those keywords means. And and the reason why is because it becomes increasingly important to be able to modify things, right? Like to be able to slightly adjust stuff. Maybe add a variable or remove a variable or call, change the method to be slightly different. Only by gaining that actual mastery of it, rather than just rote recreation, do you actually like become familiar with it and being able to do it yourself. But it always begins with just a set process. Just do this and it'll work,
I just happened to notice the mention from Lorenzo about CCCP. And I've actually told my people that that's what it should be. Because they are now they've begun to try to control the markets more than just letting them freelance. But what's happening is the new players, they come out of the new player experience and they have minimal experience. They have some because that's what it's all about, the NPE. But then they're thrown into the deep end. And if they don't already know where they want to go, they are limited.
Right.
They are limited to either join someone or sit in limbo until at that point, it takes a long time to figure out. They can't mine everything they need for most modules in HiSec.
Yeah, either join a group or cut through the jungle with like a pocket knife, basically. It's like carve your own way.
And this jungle has teeth.
That's true.
So so it's not only are the changes killing, especially small groups, and the medium station changes are not helping at all, because all that means is those small groups are not going to put up a replacement Athenor or a replacement Raideru or a replacement Astra. They're just going to say, well, I guess I'll have to do, they're either going to find a friend, where that means they have to go into an alliance or break up and go individually, or they're going to have to go all NPC stations. And, NPC stations were never my fun thing to do work in.
But given your history, wouldn't you agree that might actually be a good thing? Because that is a pressure to then go and join a group. I mean, that's how you advanced.
It is, but I had a lot of experience before I joined a group.
That's a good point.
And, I knew what I wanted to do. And I actually created my own group. So there's a little bit of a different scenario there.
Right, but I mean, like when your group got kicked in, you then took the next step and joined a bigger group with your group. That's what I meant, right? Like, so a group forms. They put
IFT. So I mean, I grabbed the reins and didn't let go for the entire time.
Fair enough. Well, so talking about your candidacy a little bit, then what I'm hearing is, and I really like, is that you're articulating the problems that everybody has been kind of talking about, the biggest issues, the biggest problems that we've been facing, but you're articulating the issues with a level of clarity that I don't always see. Like the only comparison I can think of is like CCP Aurora and during FanFest, right? Like we've all talked about we've all talked about faction warfare. We've all, gone around for over almost a decade now about what's wrong with faction warfare and how to improve it. But CCP Aurora got on stage and she said out loud the words that not only said exactly what the problems are, but what kind of solutions that there were, right? Showing not only a knowledge of the problem, but the actual issues at play that creates those problems. And so in the same way, like, I find it interesting that you're talking about some of the most polarizing things in the game, but again, because of your perspective, it is far more useful feedback, right, than a reactionary, this is bad kind of thing. Because often with game design, it isn't that the feature itself is bad, it's that there's maybe an aspect of it that's bad or whatever. So I can already see how you would be an incredibly valuable person to be on the CSM giving the feedback that they need. My concern is that, do you have what it takes to actually get on the CSM, to get elected? Do you have name recognition? Do you have, ultimately, it doesn't really matter if there's not enough votes behind it. So how are you about like gaining recognition, and can you convince me or us that you are somebody to get behind, put on your first ballot, because not only should you be on the CSM, but you can get on the CSM?
That's an aspect that I've kind of been working for longer than I ever conceived I'd be running for CSM. Uh, I've been relatively stable, come and go, build stations, lose stations in the same area for that 10 years. So we've had a lot of different groups come through. Because of our ROE, a lot of those groups are friendlies, regardless of whether we're friendly with NBSI, with nerds, with, hunters, with some wormholers. So leveraging some of those aspects are helpful. Now, the big groups that we're the friendliest with don't tend to block vote. So that could possibly be an issue. But the key is, do you want a little bit of a change in the swing of the pendulum? Do you want, because when that pendulum, CCP tends to make every significant change a marketing event, which means they push the pendulum further to one side, and then eventually it has to swing back the other direction. And it swings at least as far the other direction. And what I used to tell my guys is, we're in the pit in the pendulum here, and we're the guys down underneath that pendulum. And
Right.
every time it swings, we take a cut. And regardless of what side it's going to, you're not going to crush the null blocks. It's just not going to happen. So why don't you modify what's going on with some ores to make it easier for the smaller groups, the soloists that are just coming into the game, to earn some ISK, get some experience, have a clue how to do at least one thing. Because mining is simple, but compared to other things, you start off in high sec, mining is simple. Doing it really efficiently is a lot more complex. But it gives you a start where you feel like you've achieved something. If you already know you want to do PvP, then you're running for PvP. That's where you're going. So all pretty much all the leaders of the groups that I've dealt with over the years, even a couple that have turned out to be enemies. I mean, I'd still drink a beer with them, but in game they're enemies. You know, they have all given me positive responses. They've passed on the thing to their people that, why don't you look at this, and if you agree or if you think it's worthwhile, why don't you vote for him? And that's been my push.
I think that speaks volumes.
The I mean, like I said, our ROE is really wonky for Eve, and I hold to it extremely tightly. But it allows us to be friendly with NBSI groups and nerds groups, even, and they will shoot each other. I mean, but our philosophy is, if you're not shooting us, then it's a little different than the base nerds. If you're not shooting us, hey, we're good with you. If you promise not to shoot us, we'll put you in a standing that, we do gray,
I
just because it's a little different.
I feel like we should clarify. So you're
Yeah.
talking about NPSI is not purple shoot it, i.e., a fleet where the people in the fleet are working together, but they may
Oh,
not know each other beforehand. And nerds is not what
not
not
red.
red, don't
Don't
shoot.
shoot.
So a policy of, unless the person is actively identified as a hostile, a general rule of like live and let live.
Well, but what the nerds people will do, and it's their base philosophy, if they see you shooting a lot of neutral ships, like neutral miners and things like that, they will put you on their KOS list,
Right.
on their
Well, I
kill on
mean,
site list.
not
But
red, don't
I
shoot means that if red, then shoot. Like
well,
red
but I
is a
mean,
process.
you get on the red list without actually shooting them necessarily.
That's fair.
Um, the Whereas that's not our philosophy. And if you come through our area and you shoot one of my miners, you don't automatically go red. If you keep coming back and try to farm us, well, that's a different story. But yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't pronounce clearly. It's NBSI, so the not blue shoot it.
Oh, not blue shoot it. Got it. Got it. Got it.
So that's the diametric opposite of the nerds people.
Right.
Um, and so generally, that's not a good place to be in the middle of. But I've made a point of doing that, and we get help from both sides if we need help. been very blessed to have either side be willing, not at the same time, because that would be a little bit of an issue, but and that's my philosophy, is to provide my miners a reasonably safe area to do their indie, to do their mining, uh, to move forward. And once you're on our friends list, you don't go off unless you start to shoot it. So people come rolling into our systems that have been in soft space for a year. They're just doing a cruise. They can still dock in my system, my stations. And so what that does is it builds a lot of credibility over time. And that's why I can ask CEOs to say, if would you be willing to ask your people to look at what I'm saying? And if you agree that it would be a positive thing for Eve, vote for me.
Right. Well, that's a good strat. I mean, that's awesome. That's very reassuring. Yeah. And I was just thinking that, like, invoking the, not red, don't, not red, don't shoot. And the, whatever the that issue between those two groups, it's like, how to say that you've played this game for a long time without saying that you've played this game for a long time. Right. Like that's kind of one of the oldest conflicts of ideology within EVE Online. So it's really interesting that you walk that line. So
it's a very fine line, I will tell you.
Because they hate each other to the point where if they notice that you're associating with the others, they might just like respond negatively just for association. So yeah, it must be a bit of a dance. So I guess it's fair to say that you are running to mostly be industry and that kind of stuff as a candidate. So obviously there's been a lot of stuff happening recently when it comes to industry. We've had two pretty significant industry changes, 2 or 3. One making everything very constricted, and then the latest one kind of releasing some of that constriction a little bit, but not all the way. Let's go with a hypothetical, okay? You have just been elected.
My favorite.
Yeah, you've just been elected to the CSM, and you've gone through all your stuff, you've signed the NDAs, and you get a message from the CCP, and they're like, "Look, man, okay, we get it. We tried. We did it one way. We knew that was not going to go. We did the thing we thought they were going to like. They still hated it. What do we do? What do you tell them?"
What you do is you bring back a portion. You don't go whole hog. I mean, what CCP did originally when they created the Athenors and the additions to Moongoo of the standard ores is they went way overboard because they wanted to entice people to put stations out there and mine with your group, and because
Right.
it's not going to be a static income kind of thing. And at its concept level, it's a good idea to get it done. When you get to the application level, however, birds got to fly, fish got to swim. Eve players are going to find a way to craft something. So everybody went hog. I had 8 spot moves. I could barely use all of the trip I was mining, but I was happy to do it because they were throwing it at me.
Right.
So what needs to happen is, and then they went whole hog the other way. And now with the changes recently to medium stations, they're basically saying if you're a small corp, you're better off not putting anything in low or null at all, because 2 timers, you're gone. Your enemies can pick. Well, there's the initial. If you don't have a 24/7 standing fleet, there's only 1 timer. So
there's 1 timer. There's two attacks, but 1 timer.
Right. I consider the shield.
Fair enough.
Repair time countdown as one of the timers, but makes me happy right now. I only have 3 medium stations. If I'm not going to put a Raider up, I'm going to put another Asbel up if I'm going to do anything, just because Raider is going to be, somebody will pick whatever day they want to kill that station.
So what do we do about medium structures, right? Because so the thing about the medium structure change is that it seemed very obvious to me that what they were modeling was how can we make structures be closer to POSes, right? with the amount of time that they left on the timer, the fact that there's only one timer, it feels a lot more POS-ish than structures. But so let's assume that that's kind of the direction that they were wanting to go. But obviously, this is too critical. Like, how do we square this circle? What would be the best way to kind of get what we wanted to out of the structure changes without causing all of these profound problems that we've been looking at?
Well, one of the things to remember about a pause is if you bring in 5 subcap ships and you don't have Logi, and it's well gunned, it's gonna take forever if you can do it, or you're not gonna be able to take down that pause. That's just the way it is. If you have 5 ships on an Athanor or an Astra that's not manned, it does nothing. It's
Right.
passive target. So there's a significant difference there. And I had pauses. I had 12. I was running concurrently, 24/7. So, and they were all gunned. And every once in a while, I'd get a kill from somebody who came in and tried to shoot it, and I wasn't around. I had no clue.
It's a good point
So,
that like you could just go for the shield timer and then have one timer or whatever for the POS, but that was not insignificant. You couldn't just bring like a Lashak and Burr on it, right? Like you had to deal with you had to incap the guns and deal with whatever jammers and newts or whatever they had. So that is a fair point, right? So if a medium structure defended itself, that could potentially be a deterrent.
and you're looking at give or take similar EHPs for the shields, except you can build your resistance on the pause tower. You can't build your resistance on an Athanor. So you can put your modules up so you can increase your damage resistance so that you have them all at least at 50%. If not, if you really want to go whole hog, you can get them. You can build a keep star and have fun with it.
Right.
Or I should say a Death Star. Silly me. So there's a significant, now exactly where that point would be, it would take some modeling to bring it back. But when you kill bombs so that essentially any medium station on its own can't do anything against a drone flurry. So somebody brings in 5 Vexers and they're going to RF your station. Even if you're online for the shield, you're not going to save it unless you can call a fleet. And like I said, if you're a large entity, you have 24/7 access to pilots, it's not going to be a problem. So again, here we are with the larger entities. They'll lose some stations, they'll shoot other people's stations, it'll go back and forth. Like I said, fish got to swim, birds got to fly. It's going to happen. For the smaller entities, it's a lot, especially the people smaller than I am. I mean, I'm not big, but I have the capital and I build stations, I build ships. So I have the ability to replace any station I care to. I can build large stations and put them up. The people are smaller than I am. So, I mean, yes, it'll help my entity, but the people smaller than I am, the people who want to stay independent, the people who are more likely to pull in those new miners because it's only a few people and they feel more comfortable with only a few people and they feel there'll be fewer demands. Those are the people that are taking the hit. And the people around us that don't have stations in LoSec, as long as they prove to be friendly, they have access to our station.
Right.
Because that's the only way for them to do certain things like reactions,
Yeah,
and things of that nature. So, the whole thing comes together. I guess it's more of a psychological feel for the indie people in Eve that, the typical phrase is we haven't gotten any love for at least a couple of years, but people were feeling minimized where they don't really care about us. I've had people who've been around the game for 8, 10 years tell me, well, what's going to happen is they're going to kill industry so that CCP is going to be selling all the ships. So that, no,
that's some.
there's no conceivable way that's going to happen anytime in the near future.
Look, I have a lot of tinfoil, and that's a lot for me, man. That's That
Well,
seems a bit
I just kind of let that slide, and because you get
extreme.
an argument about that, and it just goes
Fair.
off the rail
I
even
do.
farther.
So let me ask you this then. Industry changes, right?
Yes.
Overall, the last like, do you get it, but you think that there were some problems, or do you think the entire thing was misguided?
I get the concepts. I do. But the implementation was misguided. It was overblown. It was, if they would have originally put up, and this comes to a long term philosophy I've had about the pendulum that I talked about. If they would have given 1/4 of the ore originally in Athenors, we all still would have built Athenor. And then this huge surge in ore would have been minimized. Like I said, we had 8 spod moons. Well, geez, yeah, no wonder there was too much ore floating around the world.
Right.
But you know,
Yeah.
so if it had
No
been
one
one
had any
quarter
questions as to
originally,
why there was a glut.
right? Yeah, well, but I mean, if they had gone 1/4 instead of making it a big marketing push to, you know, look what you can do now, which, like I said, I understand the concept behind it. If they would have said, look what you can do now, and had put 1/4 of that in, we would have still been happy. We
Right.
would have still built Athenors. We would, eventually, when the requirement came around, we would have still put in cores. And people might have said, well, we haven't had any buffs for a long time. Now people are saying they're killing us.
Right.
And that's the psychological difference. So I understand the core use because there was too much ore out there. I mean, like I said, even I have to admit that and it did real well for me. But what we have to do is the next step has to be an incremental step. We can't do this haul one way or the other way, because all that is doing is it alienates one group completely or the other group completely. And I'm seeing fewer indie people, just in general. Indie corps are starting to say, well, maybe I need to go to soft space, the low sec people, even some of the high sec people. Maybe, we're going to migrate out of indie. And it hurts my heart for multiple reasons, because they're friends and we do a lot of stuff together. But also, in the general consensus of Eve, it's going to be difficult to maintain the production levels that everyone needs to keep the Eve market, the Eve economy going the way it needs to go, in order for everyone to have an opportunity to start out and build their way up if they so choose. And that is the point that pushed me over the edge. These big changes where it goes all one way, all the other. Now I can, if I were to look into a crystal ball, I would say there are going to be some changes on medium stations. They're going to bring them back a little bit and make them a little more difficult to kill, eventually. But by that time, all the small corps are going to be wiped, because that they're going to be locusts coming through areas. They're going to kill everything that they can kill, and they're going to move on.
I feel like there's a lot of times where CCP does something to make something happen, not necessarily to make a balance, but to make something happen, with the understanding that once it has happened, they'll do something else. Like the good example is like the industry changes. With the changes that they made to the capitals, in my opinion, was clearly not a new normal, right? It was designed explicitly to make it a bad idea to build capitals, right? They wanted certain things to happen during scarcity. So it wasn't even about having a good balance, it was about making sure that certain behaviors happen. And so when we see these new changes, we see like kind of like a well, we're done with that and we're doing another. I guess A, do you agree with that assessment, and B, do you think that that's a good idea or not?
Well, I do believe that was their goal. Their goal, is the we'll just say that was their goal, to affect in a specific way. But B, they're so heavy-handed with it that Eve is a massive community of a lot of a very high percentage of are independently minded people. The psyop side of me says, well, if I want them to do what I want them to do, they need to decide it's what they should do on their own. If they perceive that I am pushing this on them, then I'm going to get just the opposite reaction of what I want, or I'm going to get just the opposite attitude of what I want. So what has happened is, yes, everyone says, oh, you want fewer caps, but people have memories. A year and a half to 2 years later, you're making dreads easier again. So what happened is, if it had been an incremental change and the war occurred, the super blocks are still going to have ungodly numbers of caps. It's just, like I said, it's just going to be the way it is. Economies of scale cannot be destroyed unless you're going to completely wipe out those entities. But what they did is they made everybody else in Indy, the smaller people, feel like they were marginalized. And then when you come back and make it easier, well, all those smaller groups that couldn't fit the bill for the changes are even more upset. So you're building step upon step of certain aspects of the game that are certain that they just don't matter to CCP. And by the time CCP walks back some of the changes because they feel they've achieved what they wanted to achieve, it's too late for a lot of players. They're gone. And when you lose, I know I've heard well, but look how we're retaining newer players. If you turn Eve into significantly more of F1 monkeys or PvP play only, or massive significant percentage. I played COD, I played Halo. I lasted a few years, and you learn the patterns and you learn what's going on. Now, I'll give you, don't think that I don't realize that Eve is ungodly more complex than those games. But people lose interest. A certain percentage of people will lose interest. So you're going to lose some of those newer players anyway. But the veterans are the ones who teach. The veterans are the ones who will bring along all the different aspects of Eve. The people who are wormholers, they're going to bring in new wormholers because people say, hey, that sounds neat.
Right.
Can I get together with you? And most of the wormholers will take them on and say, you're going to lose ships, you're going to die, but here's what you do. For Indy, there are groups near us that specialize in new players. We'll bring in new players, friends of people who just started playing, people who are new to the game, and we'll bring them out. We'll show them how to stay alive. I know that makes Pantomime insane, but sorry, our job is to keep them alive, not put them out there, to be targets. And that's the aspect that I'm worried that we're going to go down. And it's almost the same thing with CCP. You can't go into CCP and say, you have to do this, because it's their company. They have no need to do what you say they have to do.
It's my game. It's my vision. It's my art. You either can like it or not like it, but it's mine to make. It's kind of like, it's too easy to have them have that attitude if you just come in all like, this is dumb, don't do it,
Well, and it's the same aspect as if you go in and say, well, all the soft blocks are insane, crazy, nasty,
Right.
We need to cut them down. You're not going to get any support on CSM or anywhere else for that matter, except for the little guys.
I do want to so I feel a little bit called out on the whole like oh well, they'll just be replaced by new players thing, because that is something that I advocate for quite a bit. However, I actually agree with you on this specifically, especially when I say those kinds of things. I am mostly thinking about people who are working on the combat side of things, right? That are engaging in the systems and whatnot, because they're the ones that are experiencing the new things. They're the ones running into the missions. They're the ones, the Abyss and all that kind of stuff. Industry, however, really is one of those things that's like institutional knowledge, first of all. Like it really is something that should be taught from from mentor to mentee, far more than like I don't think that players should have to explain to another player how power grid and CPU works, but how a Titan is different, how building a battleship is different than building a cruiser. I think that's perfect for a mentor to teach. And then on top of that, we say, oh, well, they'll just come back, right? Like if somebody doesn't like what's going on right now, they can leave and then they'll come back when it's interesting again, which again, this works for the PvP pilots. This works for the warriors. This works for the FCs. These are working for the people that want glory, because when they see that there's glory again, they'll come up back and do the glory. But here's the thing. The people who are interested in, oh man, 07 to large Quake 0, glorification of the fit, mortification of the unfit. Thank you for that raid. Normally I don't break out of it for the shtick, but that's a big raid. I really appreciate large Quake 0. We were just talking to Baldin about his CSM campaign. But what I was saying is that like the people who get into industry, these are people that really dedicate and commit to what they're doing. Not just like in game, but like to be in the industry, you got to have your spreadsheets. You got to have your planning. You're doing supply chain. Like more and more, these are people that want to be mentally engaged with things. And the problem with that is that if they leave Eve, they're not going to just leave that hole there. They're going to fill it with something else. And so when you come back and you say, okay, well, we fixed industry, those people will now have to compare that against having to deal with and stop whatever it is that they've now transitioned into. I have a friend that quit because of the roll call changes, because he liked to be a foreman. He liked to provide things for his group. And arguably, Athenors provided back some of that in the fact that like people would want to be part of his group in order to have access to his installations and stuff. But he hasn't come back. Why? Because when you're a player that commits that deeply into it, to ask to recommit again is a huge ask. They probably won't come back. And so I agree that like of all of the player base, the ones that we may want to be like the most sensitive to are these people that are, don't mess with the spreadsheeters, right? Is that a good position?
I have to admit I have done spreadsheets, so I can't say that I haven't. But well, it is, it's a different experience level. I mean, you can fly with an indie fleet. You can fly with any fleet as a new pilot or with a very limited experience. But to actually you can be outrageously good in a frigate in a PvP fleet. You can be excellent as a tackle. You can do that pretty quickly. You learn the ins and outs and you're on it. To get extremely efficient in Indy takes time. There's no question about it. You can make ISK right off the bat.
Right.
If you join up with somebody like, we have moons. If you get somebody with the right moons, you can make ISK right off the bat in a venture. But you're not going to be good at what you do. If you want to be good at what you're doing and you want to do Indy, there's no way around it. To be able to run crystals, to be able to get good reprocessing, to be able to do reactions, to be able to build specific modules if you want to get up to T2, all that takes a lot more time and a lot more experience in dealing with it. Now, first of all, I don't begrudge PvPers or even the blocks for what they do, because that's their gameplay. We all have our own gameplay and we all have our own parts of Eve that we enjoy. So that's a non sequitur to say they're evil because they only shoot people. I don't like it when they shoot me or my people, but it doesn't mean that I disparage the entire set of gameplay. But what I've said to a couple PvP people is, because they say, "Oh, you have to fight in order to save you shouldn't buck up. You come up and fight." And my response to that is, if I told you had to mine for 50% of your time so you could PvP the rest of the time, would you do it?
Right.
And the answer is invariably no, because they don't want to mine. Well, I don't want to PvP.
Right. They're just saying that to you because they want to pressure you into making a decision that's advantageous to them and not you.
Right. And, it's most of the time, I mean, when we evade them and we sit around in the station and we talk, we're having as much fun as they are, probably more, because the salt they're throwing into local, we don't respond. We're just mining it. So that's our salt, not
Right.
shooting people and making them upset. It's frustrating the PvPers, and certain groups just can't get that, and that's not their adrenaline rush to get frustrated. I certainly can understand that, but by the same aspect, it is a different mindset. It's not an immediate kind of mindset for us. We build, when we were building caps every week, every cap we built, we'd kind of announce to each other, say, hey, I got this in the cooker, I got that in the cooker. Just like say, hey, I got this new fit for a new worm fit, or it's the same thing for us. And we share fits for miners, we share fits for orcas, for porpoises, and all of that.
I
So we're
think that
doing essentially the same things, but at a different pace and a different scale.
I think that there's another big piece to this though. Like if I am a Goon Swarm Titan pilot, right? And being a Titan pilot starts to suck, I can quit the game. And then when I come back, all I need to do is be like, where's my Titan? Has there been any changes? Oh, this has been nerfed, this has been buffed, but fundamentally I'm still like, I drop Titans and I do Titan things with big fleets, right? That hasn't changed, and I could probably just jump straight into it. But when it comes to industry, it's not just knowledge of process. It's not just how to build, it's what to build. There's so much contextual knowledge that you have to have in order to be an effective industrialist. I think that's what I mean by like asking an industrialist to leave and come back is very different than asking a PvPer to come to leave and come back. A combat pilot to ask and come to leave and come back,
Well,
because there's so much overhead and front work to becoming an effective industrialist beyond just having the skills and the capability.
I'll be honest, this makes me sound really, really good. So I'm with you on all that. Um, but in reality, it's the problem that arises is if you come, even if you're only a battleship pilot only, but I love my Ravens, so I don't want to get emails. But if you're a battleship pilot and you leave and they say, oh, this module is no longer available, or this module, these fits you're going to change your fits in this way and you have to modify. A lot of those materials have always been available. So most of the things you might have to change, it's you just swap one in for another, and you have different numbers depending upon what your fit is, but you swap them in and swap them out. So I 100% agree with you on that. When indie changes occur, you have new BPOs, you have new requirements for ores, you have new ores added, new PI required, you have uh, new modules to be built from PI that essentially become T2 for all intents and purposes by the time you're done with it. So it's a lot longer train to be able to get up to that aspect. I mean, we used to
Right.
build, battleships. I have 3 people who build battleships now. That's it.
Well, so like Large Quake Zero says that somebody who quits the game comes back and they've lost their edge. Of course, but here's the thing: they can jump right back into it and start to practice and get their edge, and like they're still like basically doing it. The problem is that it's not just, oh well, there's now all these changes to blueprints. There's all of the mechanical things that you would have to get back up to, understanding what changes have happened in industry. But even if nothing changed as far as like the mechanics of how industry works, because of the market and how the industry relates to the market, you can't just jump back into it. You would have to spend time learning what is valuable now, what is big now, what is the meta now, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like, well, shit, I would love to become an industrialist again in Eve Online, but it's going to take me 2 hours or more of research before I can even begin my first production line. I feel like that's just a different
That,
kind of ask.
I mean, it's a different ask, and you're 100% correct. I agree with you on that. So the frustration level is there a little bit higher than it is for straight PvP. The other aspect is, as I said earlier, people have memories. Somebody who's gone through 2 years of industry slashing, they're going to come back and they're going to say, yeah, how long before the next one comes? Even if there's some incremental improvement, you're not going to get back a certain percentage of those people. I've talked to a couple of people say, come on back. We've ironed out some of the wrinkles. We're doing better. And they're like, yeah, but when's the next hit going to come? And so they don't even make the attempt because they have been, processed into the idea that it's only so long before CCP is going to hit me again because ND doesn't matter. And what we need, and I'll transition a little bit to what we need to do because I don't think I actually completely finished that thought for
Sure.
CCP in the CSM, is we need to provide them with incremental ideas to convince them that they look at an incremental and say, well, we were going to go this far, but if we only go this far, we probably won't have to work it back. And over the same time frame, if we need to take another step, we can take that next step. And that's the aspect we have to present to CCP, where it's not only that they don't uh, they don't do something; it's they incrementally do something, and the psychological process will be, okay, yeah, they changed that. Let's see how it works, as opposed to this is going to slaughter me. I'm going to be done. I hear that from veteran. Now I hear that all the time from veteran indie people who are just like, well, I know that they're going to slaughter me next. When's the next time I'm going to get a plus? And you put that together with the fact that the promises of increased ore prices, it's going to be so worth so much more, even though there's almost no ore left, never materialized.
Right. We are,
You
by the way, running to the end of our time. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to make sure if there's anything that I've missed. Obviously, there's a lot going on. So is there any topics that you want to make sure we hit before we're done?
Well, I think we've covered, a good chunk of the aspects of why I want to run, why I think I can make a difference. I've dealt with fan council on a professional sports team. I understand the limits of what you can do. CSM certainly has more capabilities than that entity, but uh, I understand that you can't just say the absolutes because you won't get anything done. You have to, and if you build a consensus across the CSM where you're not demonizing the solve blocks because they're going to block vote, they're going to have people, and you're not demonizing them because it does you no good anyway. Let's be pragmatic about this. We can get incremental changes into Eve. Then they're easier to adapt to. They are easier to walk back if it becomes necessary. And it is easier for all of us to advance our own agendas. And if you have more new players being miners, I'll just say it. I call them the field mice of Eve. They're plentiful and easy to kill, except they have not been as plentiful of late.
Mm.
So, no ecosystem, because that's the buzzword that CCP likes now. No ecosystem is built upon on an upside down pyramid.
Right.
It's always got a large base. And if you want predators to be able to feed, you need those field mice. So some of those field mice in Eve will become squirrels and rabbits, and then some of those squirrels and rabbits become deer. And those are the ones that the large entities are going to feed on. But all along the way, you have both PvP and industry growing together. And that's the requirement. That's the way I feel it's the requirement. And that's why I want to go to CSM, because I think I can make that case and I think I can negotiate that combo between the different groups, just like I can be in the middle between nerds people and not blue shoot it people,
Right.
and provide that median voice, the pragmatic voice that allows negotiations to occur.
I agree. So the thing I like about you is there's two things about this. First of all, you're discussing something. If there's anything that we've learned during this whole scarcity process, is that like while we like to argue about balance and Munins online and all that kind of stuff, in the end, it's the industry changes, it's the production and resource harvesting stuff in the game that's going to have the most profound impact throughout the entire systems, and at the same time is likely not going to get as much attention toward by any given member of the player base or CSM or whatever. And those who do generally have an incredibly skewed perception on things. You, however, show both a tenacity for adaptability and a nuanced understanding of not only its value, but its place within the universe itself, for better and worse. And I think that that's incredibly, incredibly valuable. And then, secondly, like you said, like you working on a fan council, but also balancing between the NBSI and the NRDS groups, like that is a UN level negotiator, right? Like those are two skills that we absolutely need on the CSM. So I strongly agree. I mean, like in this, I know that there's a lot of more people focused on on like industry side of things because of what's going on, everything going on. But I think that you've got a really good claim to the idea of being like just not for the big block guy, but just for the guy who's coming in the game and just like I want this game to be good, man. I think that you're a good voice for them.
I try to be. I try to look at the reason people make decisions, even if I think they're wrong or even if I know they're wrong, and work from that because you can't convince anyone of anything if you don't know their logic. And so I do that with I've done it with customers for 40 years. I deal with Fortune 100 companies, I deal with small companies, and I deal with them directly, not just through. I'm still in the field talking to people directly,
Right.
and you know that's the only way to convince people. You have to, you provide them the information so they make their own decision, at least they feel they are, and you also have to know where their logic is coming from so you can present to them in a way that they will not so much grasp as embrace. And that's what I try to do, and that's why I look at the new players coming in and the small entities, the ones that are even smaller than I am, that don't have large stations, that can't survive if they get whacked. That's what I look at, and I'm looking at Eve. I would like it to last another 10 years. I'll be retired for a big portion of that, so I'll have plenty of time for Eve. But that is what my goal is. My goal is to bring about that balance, which is a bad word because it's used in so many different contexts, but that balance between getting things done, being pragmatic, and not alienating large groups of the game. Because saying, oh, they'll just come back, or oh, we don't need them, that will, in long term, and it will never work. And because sooner or later, every group will be alienated.
I do have
Uh,
one last question though, because
yes,
like you talk about all this professionalism, and that is could bring a very strong, like obviously you're bringing some real life skill sets, but it also sounds like you're an incredibly busy fella. Can you give me assurance that you would have the time to actually like follow through on the whole CSM thing?
the way I'm set up currently in Eve, uh, I'm on every night, and I'm discording during the day, which you now know. Uh, I am checking emails, sending emails, so I'm doing that already to a large extent. Now, if I were to focus more on CSM and a little less on IFG management, I do have people who can pick up that aspect. And I think my people, considering the years a lot of them have spent with me, understand that I won't abandon them in any way, shape, or form, but I will have priorities that will require me to do other things. And that would be CSM. So I
Awesome.
have the capability to, like I said, I'm discording during the day, I'm emailing during the day, I'm reading emails, I'm asking for intel, I'm contacting other alliances, I'm contacting other CEOs.
You say
So
Discord, but so like I don't actually see like a recommended way to contact you. Is there like a specific Discord they should go to, or what is the preferred method if somebody wants to follow up with you? Go to your forum post.
go to the forum is an initial step. I
Okay,
actually was planning to do some modifications there, and I'm going to set up a separate Discord so that we're not flooded in our Alliance Discord,
fair
and
enough.
we'll run with that for questions. You also, yeah, I mean, the forums have question and answer aspects. There are a couple other sites that I'm on. I'm on the TIS site for questions on Discord. So there are multiple places to get me, and there's
Very cool.
always in game. If I don't check my now, I don't go for notifications on mails or Discord, just because I would never stop. But if I
don't know anything about that.
Discord, yeah, if I don't do Discord checks at least probably 20 times a day, and emails just about as often, I'd be amazed. Not counting the time I'm actually logged into the game. So,
All right. Well, it's been very cool sitting down with you and meeting you and talking about all this. You've got some incredibly good insight and a lot of potential for your campaign. I'd be very excited to see you on the CSM. You're one of those people that I would definitely ask to remain involved, even if you know, either way, because obviously you've got a good head on your shoulders. And to be quite frank, we need as much good, clear signal to noise communication between CCP and the player base as possible. And ultimately, I'm not blaming the player base for that, but like, it's all of our responsibility, because if it's not good, then we're all the ones that get hurt by it. So we need people like you that can cut through that and make things happen. So best of luck to you. Thank you so much for coming and sitting down and chatting. And I hope you do really well.
Thank you. Well, I hope I do well too, but thank you very much for the opportunity. Thanks for having me on. And, we'll hopefully see you at FanFest next year when I'm a member of CSM.
Excellent. Awesome. Yes. Well, yes, I do actually I really want to go next year, because it's going to be the 20-year anniversary, but we'll see. All right. Well, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, make sure before you leave to like the video, comment, ask a question maybe to Baldin if you've got one. And of course, if you're not yet, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I post my videos here from my streams, which I do most weekdays. Although right now during the CSM campaign, that's been my primary focus. If you're watching this on the playlist, you can just kind of sit back and it'll go on to the next video. But either way, on behalf of myself and Baldin Tarmain, thank you all for coming. And until next time, we'll see you in space.